Mr. Sergeant of Arms, invite the members into the chamber and close the doors. I hereby declare the House of Representatives of the 112th General Assembly of the State of Tennessee now in session. Will the members please stand? Will the visitors in the gallery please stand and remain standing through the Pledge of Allegiance? Representative Boyd will serve as chaplain of the day. Representative Boyd, you are recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Ladies and gentlemen, it's an honor to stand for you tonight and a privilege to introduce our pastor of the day, Mr. Eric Reed from Lebanon, Tennessee. And it's sort of ironic that he's here tonight because the first time that I actually met Pastor Eric Reed was down here at the Capitol. He was down here when we did passed the Katie Beckett waiver a couple of years ago, and he was here to be a part of that, and that's when we first became acquainted. Eric is the founder and the lead pastor of the Journey Church in Lebanon, Tennessee, a church that exists to show Jesus as incomparably glorious. He also founded Knowing Jesus Ministries, a nonprofit organization that exists to proclaim timeless truth for everyday life. Prior to giving his life to full-time ministry, Eric was a Cav Scout and a paratrooper with the 82nd Airborne Division. Eric has been married to his wife, Katrina, since 2002 and has 3 children. Caleb, who went home to be with the Lord on December the 1st of 2019, his daughter, Kaylee Grace, and Kyra Piper. Pastor Eric, if you'll open us up in a word of prayer, please.
Yeah. What a privilege it is to pray for you and for this assembly tonight. Let's go to the Lord in prayer. Heavenly Father, thank you for the honor and the privilege of gathering together. Thank you for the opportunity to call upon and invoke your name and your blessing to be on these people. These men and women who represent thousands and thousands of people across the state. Lord, you called them servants of you in your word. And I know it probably doesn't always feel like they're doing your work in every piece of legislation or committee that they're in. But Lord, you see their work as upholding justice. You see their work as bringing flourishing to your people and to your creation. Their work is every bit of gospel work. It's every bit of kingdom work. It's every bit of God honoring work than my work is. And so I ask that you give them wisdom, give them discernment, allow for them to flesh out ideas and work through difficulties in view of people, in view of what will bring good to the lives of those they represent. I pray that you would help give them unity in their work in order to get things done that they could never get done on their own. And Lord, I pray especially for their families. I know in the busyness of their work and the stress of their work, often families are the ones that go without seeing them. Give them favor and blessing in their homes. I pray for their marriages, for their children. And Lord, I pray that in the stillness of their hearts, when they feel stress, when they feel strain and overwhelmed, I ask and I pray, Lord, that you would lift their eyes to you. For where does their help come from? But from you. And would you be kind and gracious, Lord, to give them your favor and blessing, professionally and privately, as they look to you. We ask and we pray all of these things in the name of our Savior, Jesus. Amen. Amen.
Representative Boyd will lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance.
Please face the flag. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Mr. Clerk, please take the roll. Mr. Clerk, please take the roll.
Mr. Speaker, 87 members present.
Let the journal reflect. Representatives Vaughn, Alexander, and Cassida are excused. Next order, Mr. Clerk.
Welcoming and honoring.
Welcome and honoring. Chairman Sapicki, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I request that the Sergeant of Arms escort our guests into the chamber.
Mr. Sergeant of Arms, escort the guests to the well, please.
Senator.
Representative Speaker, you are recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I request the clerk read the resolution.
Mr. Clerk, please read the resolution.
House Joint Resolution 880 by Chairman Sapicki and others, a resolution to honor and congratulate the 2022 Mule Day Queen, Kayla Mae Gibson. Whereas it is fitting that the members of this General Assembly should salute those young citizens who, through their extraordinary efforts, have distinguished themselves as outstanding Tennesseans of whom we can all be proud. And whereas one such noteworthy person as Kayla Mae Gibson, who was recently crowned Mule Day Queen for 2022, and whereas an active member of her community, Miss Gibson has served as Miss Murray County since 2019 and helped with the Community Family Center at Christmas time. She is a member of the Best Buddies in Junior Civitan and served as a tutor for Lipscomb's Ideal program. And whereas she evinces her devout faith as a member of the Westminster Presbyterian Church, which she serves faithfully as a member of the church choir, and whereas her noteworthy achievement is a tremendous source of pride for her family, her community, and the citizens of Murray County, and whereas the Mule Day Queen and her court play a prominent role in the promotion of Mule Day, participating in media interviews and serving as hostesses during the festivities, and whereas 2022 Mule Day Queen Kayla Gibson epitomizes the spirit of distinction and the commitment of greatness that are characteristic of true Tennesseans, her dedication to excellence is clearly deserving of the respect and admiration of this legislative body. And whereas the members of this General Assembly find it appropriate to pause in their deliberations to acknowledge and applaud this young woman for her remarkable achievement, now therefore be it resolved by the House of Representatives of the 112th General Assembly of the State of Tennessee, the Senate concurring, that we honor and congratulate Kayla Mae Gibson of Columbia upon being crowned the 2022 Mule Day Queen, extending to her our best wishes for every future success and happiness.
Representative Speaker, you are recognized.
Members and guests, this week is one that our friends back home in our district look forward to all year long. Today marks the first official day of our week-long festivities leading to Murray County's beloved Mule Day. Mule Day is one of Middle Tennessee's oldest and richest traditions. These lovely ladies have joined us today to tell you what Mule Day is all about. Accompanying Senator Hensley, Representative Kirsten, and I today is the 2022 Mule Day Queen in her court. Mr. Speaker, would it be okay for our Queen Kayla Mae Gibson to introduce her court and to speak about Mule Day?
Absolutely.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. I'm Kayla Gibson, your 2020 through 2022 Mule Day Queen. Here with me today is my first runner-up, Gracie English. And unfortunately, my second runner-up couldn't be here, but that is Katie Boshears. We have, go ahead. We also have my third runner-up, Jenna St. Pierre. And my fourth runner-up, Maddie Aviles. Thank you all very much for allowing my court and I to be here today in the capital of our great state of Tennessee. Kentucky, Missouri, Virginia, North Carolina, Arkansas, Georgia, Mississippi, and Alabama all have one thing in common. They all touch the volunteer state, also known as the great state of Tennessee. I am proud to have been born and raised here in the heart of Tennessee. Tennessee is the only state in our country that can proudly say they are home to the longest running live radio program in the world, the Grand Ole Opry, broadcasted since 1925. Tennessee is home to the Great Smoky Mountains, one of the country's most visited national parks, and of course, Graceland, Elvis's home in Memphis, the second most visited home in the country. Right here in Nashville, Tennessee, we are the country music state capital of the world. Tennessee is also home to our 16th President of the United States, James K. Polk, whose home is located in my hometown, Columbia, Tennessee. Also, we can proudly say we are home to Mountain Dew, Goo Goo Clusters, and the first Coca-Cola was made right here in Tennessee. Approximately 6,910,840 people call Tennessee home within our 95 counties. The state of Tennessee gets its name from the Indian word Tennessee. This word means the meeting place. And we certainly do have a meeting place coming up starting today. Mule Week begins in Columbia, the heart of Tennessee, where we are known as the mule capital of the world. Back in 1840, Mule Day was known as Breeder's Day. This was one day livestock show and mule market. 94 years later, in 1934, the very first Mule Day parade took place. In 1934, our first Mule Day queen was crowned, along with our first king mule. In 1974, the Murray County Bridle and Saddle Club held their first Mule Day parade. 45 years later, in 2019, we had groundbreaking numbers of approximately 200,000 people attend the Mule Day Parade. This is a huge economic impact for Columbia, Tennessee, and our state. I, as Mule Day Queen, am here today to invite you all to visit Columbia this week during our Mule Day celebrations. You might see a square dance, a variety of mule competitions, amazing food, the famous wagon train traveling about, craft shows, and even auctioneers and liars contests, and even much, much more. All of our festivities will be highlighted on Saturday, April 2nd with our Mule Day Parade, where you will see floats, wagons, a variety of animals, especially beautiful mules and horses, and a great representation of our community as a whole. The parade begins in downtown Columbia, Tennessee, Saturday, April 2nd at 11 a.m. We will be so excited to see you all there. You will find my court and I in the front of the parade behind our Grand Marshal, who this year is Cassandra Coleman, resident of Columbia, Tennessee, top 10 finalist on American Idol. My court and I are very proud to be representing our community as the longest reigning Mule Day Queen in court in history. I am very thankful for your time today and honored to be at our Capitol. We look forward to seeing you all at our upcoming Mule Day celebrations. Thank you.
Mr. Speaker, if it would be okay for Representative Curcio and then Senator Hensley to say a few words.
Yes, it would. Representative Curcio.
I just want to say thank you very much for being here. It's always a highlight of my year to have Mule Day Queen and her court on the House floor. So members, if you're not doing anything this weekend, I know it's campaign season, but come on down to Columbia, Tennessee. We'd love to see you.
Senator Hensley.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And I'd just like to add, after 2 years being off, Mule Day is back this year, and Mule Week bigger and better. If you like horses, mules of any size, any color, come to Columbia anytime this week, but especially on Saturday. But it's an honor for me to represent Murray County along with Representative Sapecki and Representative Curcio. But we are very proud of the Queen and her court. And I'd just like to add once again, if you can come Saturday, come, you will see something worth visiting for. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you. Representative Sapecki.
Mr. Speaker, I would like to thank the director of the Mule Day pageant, Lisa Flatt, and her assistant director, Rachel Houston, for all their work to making this trip possible, and for all the parents, families accompanying in the Mule Day court today. We'd ask you all to stand so we can recognize you. Members, what began in 1840s as Breeder's Day, a meeting for all of Columbia's mule breeders, is now in 2022 an event that over 100,000 guests will visit our city to partake in all things mule. We invite you to be our special guest at Mule Day this Saturday. Our famous parade will begin at 11 a.m. I promise you, you will find good food, good music, and great people waiting to see you. Mr. Speaker, if you'd come down for a photo with the Queen and her court, we'd appreciate it.
Welcoming and honoring Representative Sherrill.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. First of all, I just would like to say, I just want to thank God that God has blessed me to live to be 63 years old today and in good health, and I appreciate that very much. But also, I want to thank all the ones that has wished me a happy birthday. I appreciate that very much. Thank you again. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you. There goes that tweet. Representative Russell.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Representative Moon and I would like to welcome the Fellowship Baptist Academy's government class here to the chamber tonight. Hannah Grady, Melena Hatley, Ben Bigger, Eli Long, Evan Miner, escorted by Emily Grady and Leah Grady. Let's give them a big state capital welcome.
Chairman Dixie.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Today, we're missing one person in here is John Mark Window, but I would ask everyone to stand up. His father passed away last night, and if we could just have a moment of silence for John Mark Window's father, I'd appreciate it, and keep him in your thoughts and prayers. Thank you so much. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you. Representative Howe.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Members, please join me in welcoming Cleveland Bradley County Leadership Class of 2022 to my left in the gallery.
Representative Kiesling.
Just a moment. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Just to dovetail off of Chairman Dixie's announcement on Representative Wendell, I have just received word that visitation will be Tuesday evening and funeral will be Wednesday there in Livingston. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you. Representative Sapicki.
Members, I'd like to have you welcome somebody here today that this year I would have spent 25 years with in marital bliss with. My wife, Teresa, is here with the two boys that she carried for 9 months and are now the pride and joy of my life. If you can stand and just welcome them to the General Assembly, we'd appreciate it.
Representative Shaw.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'm good. It's already been done. Thank you.
Thank you. Representative Sparks.
Thank you, Speaker. Speaker and members, there were 6,261 veteran suicides in 2019. I've got some folks up in the gallery to my right that are doing something about it. I got two groups I want to recognize. One is J.T. Cooper. He was at Black Hawk Down. He experienced post-traumatic stress disorder himself. He went on to start Warrior Rounds. Some of his volunteers are here tonight. Alexis Wilkins, Melanie Wilkins, Patrick Allen, Macy Corder. Raise your hand, JT. He's got some famous songs. Pull them up on YouTube. Give him a big hand, JT Cooper. And members, I've got some music therapists that are here as well. If they can stand, they're making a strong difference working with these folks at nursing homes, Parkinson's patients, Alzheimer's, Monroe Carroll Children's Hospital at Vanderbilt, Yvonne Glass, Allison Rogers, Carrie Friedel, and Allison Kerr. Please make them feel welcome, members. Thank you.
Representative Manis.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. It's not often we have fine people from Knox County here with us. And tonight we have an individual who is a personal friend of mine from Knox County, and I would like to ask her to stand so we can give her a warm welcome here. Janet Testerman. So thank you for being with us, Janet.
Anyone else seeking recognition? All righty. Next order, Mr. Clerk.
Introduction to resolutions.
Leader Lambert, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move that all resolutions properly filed be introduced pursuant to Rule number 17 and placed on the consent calendar or referred to the appropriate standing committee.
Without objection, so ordered. Next order, Mr. Clerk.
Senate Joint Resolutions congratulatory and memorializing.
Leader Lambert, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move that all Senate joint resolutions congratulatory and memorializing in line on the desk be placed on the consent calendar pursuant to Rule number 17.
Without objection, so ordered. Next order, Mr. Clerk.
Resolutions lying over.
Leader Lambert, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move that all resolutions lying over be referred to the appropriate standing committee.
Without objection, so ordered. Next order, Mr. Clerk.
Introduction of bills, Senate bills on first consideration.
Leader Lambert, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move that Senate bills 384, 918, 1,887, 2,077, 2,118, 2,163, 2,181, 2,199, and 2,694 transmitted by the Senate be held on the desk pending third consideration of their companion House bills.
Without objection, so ordered. Next order, Mr. Clerk.
Senate bills on second consideration, House bills on second consideration.
Leader Lambert, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move that House Bill 2,910 be passed on second consideration to be held on the desk or referred to the appropriate standing committee.
Without objection, so ordered. Next order, Mr. Clerk.
Petitions and memorials, reports from standing committees, reports from select committees, calendars. Mr. Speaker, the House has a consent calendar.
Chairman Zachary, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move passage of the consent calendar on third and final consideration in keeping with Rule 50.
Gentleman moves passage of the consent calendar properly seconded. Mr. Clerk, any objections been filed?
Mr. Speaker, item 9, House Joint Resolution 848. Item 10, House Joint Resolution 849. Item 11, House Joint Resolution 850 have all been objected to by Leader Lambert.
All right. Anyone seeking recognition on the consent calendar? Seeing none, we are voting on the consent calendar. All members in favor vote aye when the bell rings. Those opposed vote no. As every member voted, does any member wish to change your vote? Mr. Clerk, please take the vote.
Ayes 87, no nays.
Having received the constitutional majority, I declare the consent calendar passed. I object to the motion to reconsider is tabled. Let the journal reflect Representative Whitson is excused. Next order, Mr. Clerk.
Mr. Speaker, the House has a regular calendar.
First bill, Mr. Clerk.
House Joint Resolution 740 by Representative Sparks and others, a resolution designating the week of February 28, 2022 as Tennessee Music Therapy Week.
Representative Sparks, you're recognized.
Thank you, members. Thank you, Speaker. I move to adoption of HAR 740.
Representative Sparks moves adoption properly seconded. Mr. Clerk, any amendments been filed?
Mr. Speaker, no amendments filed.
Representative Sparks, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I come before you with this piece of legislation. Some of y'all may think it's just really simple. It's just about music. It's the first bill on the calendar. We're in Music City. I'll tell you where this bill kind of came from. I've seen the great work that J.T. Cooper, that I recognized earlier, has done for our veterans. They used to say we're at 22 suicides a day. But I've got a sister in a nursing home, and many of y'all have had to deal with parents in nursing homes, brothers and sisters. I had a sister that fell, hit her head. She had a brain tumor years ago. And I heard her singing a song. And members, you know what song it was? It was John Denver, Take Me Home, Country Road. She was at the exit trying to escape from the nursing home. I walked up to see her, it was about 2 years ago. And I said, hey, how you doing? She said, you know how to get out of this place? I said, no. She didn't know my name, but she knew the words of that song. And I started thinking, man, there's got to be something here with the power of music. And then I started seeing the great work that JT is doing for veterans. And I started researching. Then I come across music therapist that's working with Parkinson's patients, Alzheimer's patients. I even had a couple of veterans came to me. They said, you know, they were able to get off prescription drugs with music. I had no clue until I started investigating this. As y'all know, the crisis intervention calls have increased 35% since COVID, 35%. So I want to recognize the great work they're doing. And with that, Mr. Speaker, I renew my motion.
Representative Sparks renews his motion. Any discussion on the bill? Representative Sexton.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Colleagues, I'd like to share a story about a song that I'm sure that we all know very well. A song that was written by Horatio Spafford back in the 1800s. And it's a song entitled, It Is Well With My Soul. Many times we sing these songs and have no idea where the words come from or why, but I'd like for you to listen to this Horatio Spafford was a successful lawyer and businessman in Chicago and had a lovely family, a wife, Anna, and 5 children. However, they were not strangers to tears and tragedy. The young son died with pneumonia in 1871. And then that same year, much of their business was lost to the Great Chicago Fire. Yet God, in His mercy and kindness, allowed the business to flourish once more. On November the 21st, 1873, the French ocean liner Ville du Havre was crossing the Atlantic from the U.S. to Europe. With 313 passengers on board, among the passengers were Mrs. Spafford and their 4 daughters. Although Mr. Spafford had planned to go with the family, he found it necessary to stay in Chicago to help solve an unexpected business problem. He told his wife that he would join her and their children in Europe a few days later. His plan was to take another ship. About 4 days later, into the crossing of the Atlantic, the Ville du Havre collided with a powerful iron-hulled Scottish ship, the Loch Earn. Suddenly, all those on board were in grave danger. Anna hurriedly brought her 4 children to the dock. She knelt there with Anna, Margaret Lee, Bessie, and Taneda, and prayed that God would spare them, if that would be His will, or to make them willing to endure whatever awaited them. Within approximately 12 minutes, the Ville du Havre slipped beneath the dark waters of the Atlantic, covering with the 226 of the passengers, including the 4 Spafford children. As Horatio crossed finally at the very same spot where he lost his 4 daughters, the captain of the ship brought him out and he said, "This is where the ship went down." He went back to his cabin and he penned these words: "When peace like a river attendeth my way, when billows like sea, when sorrows like sea billows roll, whatever my lot thou hast taught me to say, it is well with my soul." Thank you.
Any further discussion? Seeing none, any objection to the question? Seeing none. All those in favor of House Joint Resolution 740 vote aye when the bell rings. Those opposed vote no. Has every member voted? Does any member wish to change their vote? Mr. Clerk, please take the vote.
Ayes 90, no nays.
House Joint Resolution 740 having received the constitutional majority, I hereby declare adopted without objection. The motion to reconsider is tabled. Call up next bill, Mr. Clerk.
House Bill 1930 by Representative Cooper and others relative to student discipline.
Representative Cooper, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move passage of House Bill 1930 on third and final consideration.
Representative Cooper moves passage, probably seconded. Mr. Clerk, any amendments been filed?
Mr. Speaker, no amendments filed.
Representative Cooper, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I renew my motion.
Representative Cooper renews her motion. Any discussion on the bill? Seeing none, any objection to the question? Seeing none. All those in favor of House Bill 1930 vote aye when the bell rings. Those opposed vote no. Has every member voted? Does any member wish to change their vote? Mr. Clerk, please take the vote.
Ayes 90, no nays.
House Bill 1930 having received a constitutional majority, I hereby declare passed without objection. The motion to reconsider is tabled. Call up next bill, Mr. Clerk.
House Bill 1944 by Chairman Sapiki and others relative to obscenity.
Chairman Spicky, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move passage of House Bill 1944 on third and final consideration.
Chairman Spicky moves passage, probably seconded. Mr. Clerk, call the First Amendment.
House Criminal Justice Committee Amendment number 1.
Chairman Kershaw, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move to roll that to the Hill.
Without objection, roll to the Hill. Next amendment, Mr. Clerk.
Amendment 2 by Representative Clemens. Mr. Speaker, it was timely filed.
Representative Clemens, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Ladies and gentlemen, this amendment is the result of a discussion that we had in the House Education Committee. Several concerns were raised by a good colleague of that committee. A gentleman from Perry County raised a question that raised some alarms in my mind about the burden or the adverse action that would be possible to librarians or school employees if these books were pulled out or these materials were deemed questionable or harmful to minors. So this amendment, all it does, it maintains the full spirit and language of the sponsor's bill. All that remains intact. We asked questions in the committee about this language, and the sponsor, I think he'll admit, said that he believed it to be implied. So what I did is just made it express language in this legislation. And what it does is it protects librarians and school employees from any adverse employment actions that may result from the subjective political decisions of school board members who may make a decision about these materials. It also makes decisions of the school board's final and limited to the specific age groups for which the decision was intended. So for instance, if you deem a book harmful to minors in K through 5, it may be appropriate to high schoolers, and you shouldn't pull the book off every shelf just because it's offensive or someone deems it offensive to a kindergartner. Ultimately, what this amendment does is I think it basically expressly states the intent of the sponsor, as he said in committee, and it gives you an option. Adopting this amendment makes clear that the obscene or harmful material is the target of this legislation, not the librarians and the school employees. Now, I object to the bill as a whole. That's no secret. But I think if you adopt this amendment, you make clear that the material is the intent here and the focus of this legislation, not the hardworking school librarians and public employees who are simply doing their job, and their decisions and educated judgments about materials that are appropriate for our children are going to be subjected to the subjective, arbitrary political views of an elected body. They should not suffer employment repercussions as a direct of that school board's decision. This bill protects them, it holds them harmless, and it again makes the restrictions limited to age appropriate. With that, I would ask adoption of this amendment. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Representative Clemens moves adoption of amendment number 2, probably second. Any discussion on the amendment? Chairman Spicky, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And as the representative from Davidson County made reference to, it does leave in effect most of the bill, but not all of the bill, and it changes a lot of the intent of it. There's a provision in the original bill amendment as amended has that when a complaint is issued or brought to the attention of a superintendent, that objectionable material would be pulled for 30 days under consideration. That is omitted. Also, unless the board of the local school board gives direct written notice that a book has been deemed obscene or pornographic, it gives the permission and the ability for the librarian to put that back on the shelf, even though the school board has deemed it inappropriate. And lastly, you can get into a appeal decision of the school board, and that was not the intent of the original bill. So with that being said, I make a motion to move it to the table.
That's proper motion, properly seconded. The primary situation is Representative Clemens has moved adoption of amendment number 2. Chairman Spicky has moved that motion to the table. That cuts off all debate except for that of the sponsor. Representative Clemens, you are recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And I believe the sponsor of the legislation is misreading some of the intent of the amendment. It simply says that adverse action may not be taken against the school librarian or employee unless they have been advised to remove it. So they can't know to remove something that they haven't been advised to remove. Again, simply, Mr. Speaker, sponsor, and colleagues, this gives you the opportunity to make clear what the target is of this legislation.
Are we targeting the librarians and public school employees who are simply doing their job and making an educated judgment about what's appropriate? Or are we focused on removing harmful materials from the schools? If it's the latter, then we need to protect the public schools employees and educators who are simply doing their job and are being subjected to second guessing by political decision makers. With that, I would ask you to vote against the tabling motion. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Department of Family Situations, Representative Clemens has moved adoption. Amendment number 2, Chairman Spicky has moved that motion to the table. We are voting on the tabling motion. All those in favor vote aye when the bell rings. Those opposed vote no. As every member voted, does any member wish to change their vote? Mr. Clerk, please take the vote.
Aye, 63, 26 nays.
The ayes have it. The motion to move amendment number 2 to the table is tabled. Next amendment, Mr. Clerk.
Mr. Speaker, that brings the body back to the heel of the amendments, House Criminal Justice.
Chairman Kershaw, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. House Criminal Justice Committee Amendment number 1 makes the bill. I move adoption of House Criminal Justice Committee and defer to the sponsor for further explanation.
Chairman Kershaw moves adoption of amendment number 1, probably second. Any discussion on the amendment? Seeing none. All those in favor of amendment number 1 say aye, aye. All those opposed say no. The ayes have it. You adopt it. Next amendment, Mr. Clerk.
Mr. Speaker, no further amendments.
Chairman Spicky, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Members, this is a very simple bill. It's made to protect our librarians and prevent the arbitrary removal of a book from a school library. That's what the bill does. It changes Title 39 in code that anything that is obscene or pornographic with the intent to distribute to minors that is illegal outside of K-12 will now be illegal inside of K-12. That's what that part does. And the second part, what that does is it protects to make sure that before a book is deemed inappropriate or even age level inappropriate, there has to be a process put in place that protects that process of those books being removed. And ultimately, the decision of that will be left up to the ones that represent those local community standards, those school boards, those elected school boards that are there and put there by the people of their districts to represent them of what their community standards are and determine whether or not a book that is appealed by a parent is objectionable, is pornographic, is obscene, or is even grade level inappropriate, and they will take action on that. Mr. Speaker, that's all the bill does, and members, I renew my motion.
Chairman Spicky renews his motion. Any discussion on the bill? Representative Faison.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I'd like to make a motion to limit this debate to 2 minutes per member.
All right. You've heard the motion. There's a second. Any discussion to limit the debate to 2 minutes? Oh, it's non-debatable. Sorry about that. Is there objection? It looks like there's objection. All right, we're voting on the board. We're voting on the motion to limit debate to 2 minutes per person, correct? All those in favor vote aye when the bell rings. Those opposed vote no. As every member voted, does any member wish to change their vote? Ms. Clerk, please take the vote.
Aye, 66, 23 nays.
The motion prevails. All right, Chairman Dixie, you're up.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. So this bill, it went through the criminal, so I'm not sure about the amendments, but if it went through the criminal system, there is a criminal penalty to be assessed. So if a book is deemed inappropriate, obscene, or pornographic, who will receive this penalty?
Chairman Spicky.
Thank you for that question. Nobody would receive that penalty if the school board deems that it's obscene or pornographic and moves to remove that from the school library. The book is removed from the school library and that's it. The only time a possible penalty could come in here is if a librarian did not follow the direction of their school board and put that back on the shelf in direct opposition to their school board.
Chairman Dixie.
So my question is, let's say that two questions. Is there going to be a list of books that are already deemed that, so that librarians will know that to go through their libraries to make sure that those books aren't in there?
Chairman Spicky.
We just passed a bill about a week and a half or 2 weeks ago, sponsored by Governor Lee, that would create an online database of all of those titles. So all the people of that LEA would have the opportunity to look at those titles and determine whether or not that they found something as objectionable. And if they did, they could make that issue with the superintendent.
Chairman Dixie.
So what if there's a book that's in there that's not on that list, but a parent comes in and says, hey, I questions that particular book, and it's found to meet those criteria, but it was already in there. The library didn't put it in there. So does the librarian go to jail because of that?
Chairman Spicky.
No, once again, the only time the penalty would come in is if the school board made a motion and voted in a unanimous decision to remove a book. The only time that a penalty come in is if the librarian decided to just say, I'm not going to do that, and put the book on the shelf. Then Title 39 would come in and say, because of that ruling by the school board and the action taken by that librarian, then they have an intent to distribute pornographic or obscene material to minors.
Representative Cooper.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. With the sponsor year,
He does.
I'm concerned because there is a law, I think. Are you familiar with the Tennessee Book Commission?
Chairman Spicky. Representative Cooper, can you repeat that, please?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Speaker. Are you familiar with the Tennessee Book Commission?
Chairman Spicky.
You're speaking of the textbook commission? Yes, ma'am.
Representative Cooper.
Then would that textbook commission be responsible for all books that are approved to go to the schools in the state of Tennessee?
Chairman Spicky.
No, the textbook commission would not be involved in this piece of legislation.
Representative Cooper.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Any further discussion? Representative Johnson.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. So we're limiting discussion on a bill to ban books. Got it. My concern is the same as always. My concern is that we have a few people that are going to determine what books are in a school library. We've used the Miller test for 50 years. Librarians, educators understand this test. A lot of times folks on the school board are not familiar. They're not experts at these things. And it is very concerning to me that a few folks are going to determine what thousands are able to read. And I completely respect and understand a person's right to have their student, their child, not check out a book. But to remove it isn't acceptable, because I can guarantee you in most instances, there's a majority that do want their child to read that book. So this is a serious concern of mine. And here we are limiting speech while we're talking about removing books from the library. And I think that's important. And I think, do you have anything against parents deciding what their student can read, but allowing the book to stay in the library for others?
Chairman Spicky.
To answer your question briefly, the parents are in this bill already have the ability to determine what they're going to allow their students to read. But the obscene pornographic nature of this material, and I'm sure you know the material we're talking about, you probably heard it read in committee, that when it was heard in committee, the vileness of the language used for our elementary and middle school children, even our high school children, should never be heard. And so I appreciate your concerns.
Representative Johnson.
Actually, people wouldn't agree on that. And you have to take the context from the book. I'm not sure that any of the people complaining.
2 minutes up. Any further discussion? Representative Love.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and to the bill's sponsor. Is there going to be a general definition of obscene in the bill, or is it left up to whatever the particular parent may ask to be removed because they deem it to be as obscene.
Chairman Spicky.
The definition of obscenity is already in code.
Representative Love.
So just for the record, so we're using the definition in code as the definition for this?
Chairman Spicky.
The definition is this, the average person applying contemporary community standards would find that the work taken as a whole appeals to the prurient interest. Also, the average person applying contemporary community standards would find that the work depicts and describes in a patently offensive way sexual conduct, and the work taken as a whole lacks serious literary, artistic, political, or scientific value.
Representative Love.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Thank you, Chair.
Representative Hardaway.
Thank you, Speaker. The sponsor just read the definition for obscene, and the word community was mentioned a couple of times. Is that community, since each LEA has its own jurisdiction, are we talking about those communities or the community of the state?
Chairman Spicky.
Your community from your local LEA would make those decisions. Community standards would be based off of what those elected leaders of those individual LEAs would deem obscene, pornographic, or age level inappropriate.
Representative Hardaway.
And what role would the state have in, if any, in identifying books, in overruling the decisions of the local LEA, et cetera?
Chairman Spicky.
In the bill, there's only two provisions where the state would even come into play. The first one is all the LEA has to do is adopt the process on how a complaint would be handled. That would satisfy the Department of Education in the bill. And the second part is if any book is removed from a library, annually, they would have to file a report with the Department of Education just so they can track those books.
Representative Hardaway.
Thank you. And Speaker, you're eating up about 5-10 seconds every time you have to call my name. But we would, in fact, have different standards because there would be different communities have different standards. So you're not going to have one standard for the whole community, for the whole state of Tennessee. Is that correct? That's
Representative Spicky, you're recognized.
That is correct.
Representative Towns. He was, yeah, nice try. I'll speak slower for those of you who would like to. Representative Manis.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Just, we all come here to represent a district, and I've been in turmoil over this one for House Bill 1944. And I guess in my opinion, if we vote one way on this bill, and I certainly respect the time that you have spent on this, and I appreciate your efforts. But as I read through it, if we vote yes, we will be perceived as perverts and that we condone pornographic materials in our schools. And if we vote no, we'll be perceived by educators that we don't trust them, or maybe the opposite. We don't trust them to make good decisions when it comes to our kids. And I just want to go on record that I am adamantly against children ever being exposed to any kind of pornographic material. And at the same time, I wholeheartedly support, trust, and encourage our educators. I'm just concerned that this legislation could be used to subjectively eliminate education materials that people misjudge to be harmful or offensive strictly due to their own personal prejudice or bias. It would also appear, as you referenced earlier, that House Bill 1944 is not needed due to the most recent age-appropriate bill that we passed in the chamber, I think just last week or the week before. In Knox County, there are already protocols in place to address the concerns of this material. And I guess last week on Channel 4 here in Nashville, there was a news story that talked in great detail about an educator shortage we have across our state, and it referenced a county very close by. If a prospective teacher is looking to come to Tennessee after hearing all the details of this legislation we've been discussing, I have to ask myself, what incentive do they have to do so? Lastly, and probably most important, I have family members who are educators. I'm not going to say to them that after all these years of teaching our kids, I now don't trust you. We are passing laws to reinforce we don't trust you. Thank you.
Representative Beck.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Will the sponsor yield?
Chairman speaking.
Yes.
Sponsor, when this came through committee that I was sitting on, as the law stands right now, there's an exception to the obscenity law for education. And at that time, your bill removed that exception for education. Is that how the bill stands as we're here today?
Chairman speaking.
Mr. Speaker and members, it removes the exception in K through 12 for obscene pornographic material that is with the intent to be distributed to minors.
Representative Beck.
So as we stand here today, our librarians and our teachers have a defense to this charge of obscenity. But if we pass your bill today, our librarians and our teachers no longer have that defense as being an exception to the law. So we're in fact going to try and we're going to pass a bill that criminalizes our professionals in the libraries and in the teaching profession by removing this exception. Is that correct?
Chairman speaking.
No, that's not correct. What the bill does, it allows librarians and allows teachers to do their job as they've been paid to do for 100 years in Tennessee or more. It provides a process for protection for them that if any one group tries to target a librarian, that there's a process in place to protect the librarian or the teacher from doing their job. The intent of the legislation is to make sure two things. Number one, a librarian or a teacher is protected by the process from doing their job. And number two, it prevents the arbitrary removal of any book from a library based off of one person's opinion.
Representative Clemens.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Sponsor, you say it protects the teacher by installing a process. But what if that process results in a decision against a book? What is to prevent that school board from then taking adverse employment action against that teacher for having that book on that bookshelf to begin with?
Chairman speaking.
Well, at the beginning, there was no intent for the distribution of pornographic or obscene material because the LEA had not ruled on that. Once the school board rules that a particular textbook is pornographic or obscene, then Title 39 would come into place if a teacher went against their school board after they've ruled on this, or a librarian after they've ruled on the decision on the book and still distribute it to minors. Well, that would be obscene or pornographic materials with the intent to distribute to minors. Therefore, the change in Code 30 or Title 39 would take effect.
Representative Clemens.
Is it your intent for these decisions by the school board to be final?
Chairman speaking.
Yes, sir.
Representative Clemens.
Is it your intent for these decisions to be age level specific with regard to elementary, middle, or high school libraries?
Chairman speaking.
That decision would be left up to the local school boards on what they want. As one of the other representatives from Shelby County stated, that this decision needs to be left at the local level with those school board members who are elected by the people of that community to espouse their community standards and what a reasonable person would deem obscene or pornographic. That's why the bill is written in its way, to give them the latitude, because Davidson County may have a different view of what obscene and pornographic is from Murray County as it would from Tipton County.
Representative Clemens.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I would caution my colleagues, this is not a false narrative between supporting obscenity.
Representative McKenzie.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. To the sponsor, you had earlier read a definition of obscene or obscenity. Is that correct?
Chairman speaking.
Yes, but I'd like to come back and clarify something that another representative made a statement on that was incorrect. The the statement was made that if you support this bill, then you are supporting obscene and pornographic materials in our school system. And if you voted no, then you weren't, and it's just the opposite. If you vote yes for this bill, you are supporting keeping pornographic material and obscenity and age level inappropriate from our classrooms. And if you vote no, then you would be voting in the affirmative to allow that into our classrooms to our students.
There's time limits on debate. It's not based on your individual 2 minutes, Representative McKenzie. Representative McKenzie.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. So that was not an answer to my question, but I'll try this again. During your definition, you spoke of contemporary definition. How do you define the word contemporary?
Chairman Spicky.
Very clearly defined in the community standards that it's based off of, where a local school board is afforded this opportunity to decide based off what their views, their values, what their community to elected them to do, that it would give them the latitude to deem obscene or pornographic or age level appropriate at the smallest level possible at the local level. There's nothing in this bill that creates a state mandate on obscenity or pornography. It was the true intent of this bill to make sure that it's limited to the local school system.
Representative McKenzie.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Having a floating definition of a term is going to create all kinds of issues and lawsuits.
Representative Towns.
Mr. Speaker, thank you. Mr. Representative, my question to you is there any financial responsibility for the person that potentially violates the ordinance? Are they financially liable, or when they get penalized, or are they criminally liable?
Chairman Speaker, you recognize.
Thank you for the question. So to reiterate, there is no penalty in law until a school board rules on whether a book is pornographic or obscene and makes a ruling on that to direct the librarian to remove the school that text permanently. If a librarian would basically tell their school board, I'm not going to listen to you and I'm going to do what I want, then the changes in Title 39 would take place. First time offense would be, I believe, a Class A misdemeanor. Second time would be a Class E felony.
Representative Towns.
Question, why is it that we would go that route when the administrative staff of any school could possibly talk to the people, maybe write them up and put it in their file, as opposed to making it something that is extreme like that? Why could we not use that measure? Typically, behavior on jobs are modified by, administrative, people, so to speak.
Chairman Spicky.
Ask the question again. I missed half of it. I'm sorry.
Representative Towns.
Mr. Chairman, if you don't mind putting my time back on the board, I'd love to have it. I'm just simply asking, why could we not use an administrative measure with a manager or someone to modify their behavior by writing them up, giving them a warning or something of that nature? That's corporate 101.
Thank you, and I'll answer that question for you. Currently in Title 39, if somebody has the intent to distribute pornographic or obscene materials to minors, first offense is a Class A misdemeanor. Second offense is a Class D felony. There is an exemption for all of K-12 for that. So if somebody has possession of obscene or pornographic material with the intent to distribute to minors, I would hope we would all stand together and say that is not reprehensible.
Representative Stewart.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Have you looked into the groups that are behind this national movement that all of a sudden has found all these problems in school libraries that for decades we've never had before? Have you looked at any of the groups like Parents Defending Education, Moms for Liberty? Have you looked at the funding and where all that sort of thing comes from? These groups that created this problem that for some reason we never had to deal with for years and years and years?
Chairman Spicky.
Yes, I have, and one would argue that the reason why these parents, and I assume you're talking about parents of Tennessee, concerned about their children's education and what material they're exposed to, a year and a half ago, 2 years ago, when we sent the whole system home virtual. Moms, dads, grandparents, grandmothers were able to hear what our children were being taught. And it started a movement of parents. Now, I assume you're talking about the parents of Tennessee who are still concerned about the education of their children and what they're being taught. They have risen up and said, we want to know what is in our school libraries and what our children are being taught. So once again, if you're asking me, have I studied the parents of Tennessee who are concerned about their children? I think 7.5 hours of debate in criminal justice committees have proven that, yes, the people are well aware of their rights.
Representative Stewart.
And here's my problem. Unfortunately, debate's been cut off, so you and I can't go through this in detail. The problem is none of that is true, and that whole debate was largely made up. I mean, this is all a funded effort by groups like Parents Defending Education, run by Nicole Nelly, a Koch brothers operative, to make life hard for public schools because the people funding these organizations are fundamentally against public schools.
Chairman Sapicki. Nope. All right. Representative Warner.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. A call for previous question.
Previous question's been called. Any objection? There's objection. We're voting on previous question. All those in favor vote aye when the bell rings. Those opposed vote no. Has every member voted? Does any member wish to change their vote? Mr. Clerk, please take the vote.
Aye, 64, 23 days.
Previous question prevails. We are voting on House Bill 1944 as amended. Vote aye. All those in favor vote aye when the bell rings. Those opposed vote no. Has every member voted? Does any member wish to change their vote? Mr. Clerk, please take the vote.
Aye, 63, 24 days.
House Bill 1944, having received a constitutional majority, I hereby declare passed without objection. The motion reconsider is tabled. Call the next bill, Mr. Clerk.
House Bill 2291 by Representative Love, relative to academic standards for social studies.
Representative Love, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move passage of House Bill 2291 on third and final consideration.
Representative Love moves passage, probably second. Mr. Clerk, call it First Amendment.
House Education and Instruction Committee Amendment number 1.
Chair Lady Moody, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move to adopt and defer to the sponsor for explanation.
Chair Lady Moody moves adoption amendment number 1, probably second. Any discussion on amendment? Seeing none. All those in favor of amendment number 1 say aye. Aye. All those opposed say no. The ayes have it. You adopted. Next amendment, Mr. Clerk.
Mr. Speaker, no further amendments.
Representative Love, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And members, this piece of legislation would encourage us to look at adopting in our standards for social study the nonviolent teachings of Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. It would be for grades 9 through 12. And I think this is a wonderful opportunity for us to talk about, again, Dr. King's nonviolent approach to making our country a better place. With that, Mr. Speaker, I renew my motion.
Representative Love renews his motion. Any discussion on the bill? Seeing none. Any objection to the question? Seeing none. All those in favor of House Bill 2291 as amended, vote aye when the bell rings. Those opposed vote no. Has every member voted? Does any member wish to change their vote? Mr. Clerk, please take the vote.
Ayes 82, 2 days, 3 present, not voted.
House Bill 2291, I received the constitutional majority. I hereby declare passed without objection. The motion to reconsider is tabled. Call the next bill, Mr. Clerk.
House Bill 2270 by Representative Ogles, relative to criminal law.
Representative Ogles, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move passage of House Bill 2242 on third and final consideration. Okay. Sorry about that. 2270 on third and final consideration.
Representative Ogles moves passage. Probably second. Mr. Clerk, call it First Amendment.
House Agricultural and Natural Resources Committee Amendment number 1.
Chairman Halford, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Move to adopt and defer to the sponsor for explanation.
Chairman Halford moves adoption amendment number 1. Probably second. Any discussion on the amendment? Seeing none. All those in favor of amendment number 1 say aye. Aye. All those opposed say no. The ayes have it. You adopt. Next amendment, Mr. Clerk.
Mr. Speaker, no further amendments.
Representative Ogles, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And members, this piece of legislation simply commingles BUI and DUI. So if you get one by land, one by sea, the next one you get will be 3. I renew my motion.
Representative Ogles renews his motion. Any discussion on the bill? Seeing none. Any objection to the question? Seeing none. All those in favor of House Bill 2270 as amended vote aye when the bell rings. Those opposed vote no. Has every member voted? Does any member wish to change their vote? Mr. Clerk, please take the vote.
Ayes 88, no nays.
House Bill 2270 on receipt of the Constitutional majority. Everybody declare passed without objection. The motion to reconsider is tabled. Next bill, Mr.
House
Clerk.
Bill 2242 by Representative Ogles relative to building codes.
Representative Ogles, you are recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move for passage of House Bill 2242 on third and final consideration.
Representative Ogles moves passage. Following second. Mr. Clerk, call up first amendment.
House Commerce Committee Amendment number 1.
Vice Chairman Bricken, you are recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Speaker. Commerce Committee Amendment number 1 rewrites the bill. I move to adopt Commerce Committee Amendment number 1 and refer to the sponsor for an explanation.
Moves adoption amendment number 1. Probably seconded. Any discussion on the amendment? Seeing none. All those in favor of amendment aye. All those opposed say no. The ayes have it. You adopt the next amendment, Mr. Clerk.
Mr. Speaker, no further amendments.
Representative Ogles, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker and members. This piece of legislation will marshal in conjunction with the Department of Safety to promulgate rules that will adopt minimal building standards for commercial multi-level structures to mitigate the damage that may result in blasts from explosives and then entries into structures from vehicles. With that, I renew my motion.
Representative Ogles renews the motion. Any discussion on the bill? Seeing none. Any objection to the question? Seeing none. All those in favor of House Bill 2242 as amended vote aye when the bell rings. Those opposed vote no. Has every member voted? Does any member wish to change vote? Mr. Clerk, please take the vote.
Ayes 83, 2 nays, 2 present, not voting.
House Bill 2242, having received the Constitutional majority, everybody declare passed without objection. The motion to reconsider is tabled. Next bill, Mr. Clerk.
House Bill 2533 by Chairman Ramsey and others relative to service of process. Mr. Speaker, the Senate bill is on the desk.
Chairman Ramsey, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And I move to substitute and conform to Senate Bill 2746.
Chairman Ramsey moves to substitute and conform to Senate Bill 2746. Bobby second without objection. So ordered. Chairman Ramsey.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move passage of Senate Bill 2746 on third and final consideration.
Chairman Ramsey moves passage of Senate Bill 2746 on third and final consideration. Bobby second. Mr. Clerk, call out first amendment.
House Civil Justice Committee Amendment number 1. Mr. Speaker, it's the same as Senate Amendment number 1.
Chairman Farmer, you are recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Move to withdraw.
Without objection, amendment number 1 withdrawn. Next amendment, Mr. Clerk.
Mr. Speaker, no further amendments.
Chairman Ramsey, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And as amended, this bill requires a sheriff, deputy sheriff, or constable prior to or at the time of serving someone with an order of protection or ex parte order of protection that they make reasonable effort to determine whether the person being served has an outstanding criminal warrant. It requires a sheriff, deputy sheriff, or constable in cases in which that person being served has an outstanding criminal warrant that they either serve the criminal warrant or notify the agency holding the warrant of the person's location. And the reason that we bring this bill is to address the highly publicized tragedy that happened to Marie Varsos and her mother, Debbie Seco. These two women from Lebanon, Tennessee, were hunted down and brutally murdered by Maria's husband, Sean Varsos, on April 12, 2001. These two women did everything that was required of them and depended on the system to protect them. When it failed, Mr. Varsos was served with an order of protection prior to the murders. The law enforcement agency serving the order did not check to see if he had any outstanding warrants criminally. And Sean Varsos did have 2 outstanding warrants, one for false imprisonment, and another one for aggravated assault. That both of these warrants were for criminal activity against his ex-wife, the victim. So with that explanation, pending further questions, I want to say that we regret the loss of these two fine women, and how to better protect vulnerable citizens going forward with this piece of legislation. So I would renew my motion.
Chairman Ramsey renews his motion. Any discussion on the bill? Seeing none. Any objection to the question? Seeing none. All those in favor of Senate Bill 2746, vote aye when the bell rings. Those opposed, vote no. As every member casts a vote, does any member wish to change their vote? Mr. Clerk, please take the vote.
Ayes 90, no nays.
Senate Bill 2746, having received a constitutional majority, I hereby declare passed without objection. The motion to reconsider is tabled. Next bill, Mr. Clerk.
House Joint Resolution 752 by Representative Sexton of Granger and others, a resolution to designate the Holy Bible as the official state book.
Representative Sexton, you recognize.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I move to adopt HJR 0752.
Representative Sexton moves adoption. Probably second. Mr. Clerk, any amendments been filed?
Mr. Speaker, no amendments filed.
Representative Sexton, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Once again, I would like to introduce the Bible as the state book. We voted on this last year, and there were some problems in the Senate, so we had to bring it back again this year. The HJR that we brought last year is the same as this one, with the exception of some of the language. If you remember, each of you were given an Aiken Bible, which was the first American Bible printed in the United States of America. And there's a resolution in Congress that states that it gave Robert Aiken the right to print the very first American Bible. And not only did they say that it would be good for them to print it, but it'd be good for them to read it as well, talking about the Americans. So we put that language in there to do nothing more than to just show the history of the Bible in America. And as I have done this will be my fourth time, I'd just like to share a few statistics with you, if I can. Tennessee leads the world in printing the Bible, and that's done so since 1854. In 2018, the printing of Bibles and related materials generated $597.7 million in sales. It's been translated into every language that has a written form. It forms the basis of our Western philosophy. The biblical concepts of natural law and God-given rights form the basis of American political thought. It has influenced work of literature and pop culture. There have been more than 1,000 references or allusions to the Bible in Shakespeare's writings. The works of John Donne, Herman Melville, and Ernest Hemingway draw on biblical themes. The Matrix is so full of biblical archetypes and references that there have been multiple books written about them. Harry Potter references the Bible. Some of Lady Gaga's songs in Born This Way. Dolly Parton's Coat of Many Colors represents the story of Joseph in the Bible. Words and idiom expressions in American history and English come directly from the Bible. Have you ever heard the term scapegoat? Or you are the apple of my eye, referring to a traitor as a Judas, calling a skeptic a doubting Thomas. Someone who helps a stranger is a good Samaritan. I'm taking good care of resources entrusted to you is being a good steward. Biblical principles form the basis of the laws of our legal system. With all of this, I'd just like to ask you to join with me in voting the Bible. This HJR, all that it does, it asks the Secretary of State to put it doesn't ask him, it informs him to put this into the Blue Book, and that's all that it does. It didn't require anyone to do anything else, just to recognize it as our state book. Thank you. I renew my motion.
Representative Sexton renews his motion. Any discussion on the bill? Representative Shaw.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Tonight, I'm not going to make this a long discussion as we did last year. Matter of fact, I think I'm going to see if the Bible can answer the question that needs to be answered. Here's what Isaiah says to us in Isaiah 55, verses 8 and 9. For my thoughts are not your thoughts, and your ways are not my ways. The Lord declares, for as heaven is higher than earth, my ways are higher than your ways, and my thoughts than your thoughts. The church is a living organism. There is nothing, no other institution on earth that can meet the standards of the Lord Jesus' church. And to make the Bible a state book is really, I'm trying to find a good word, is false professions for us to say that we live according to the Bible. The Bible is for every individual to read, but it's nobody's book but God's. And for that reason, Mr. Sponsor, I cannot vote to make this Holy Bible a state book after looking at what goes on in this house day by day. Thank you.
Representative Sexton.
Representative Shaw, I respect you and I appreciate your work, as I'm sure you do mine. You just made my point by bringing that holy book into this chamber and reading from that holy book in this chamber. I love the Word of God. I live by the Word of God. And it's been an honor for me to share the opportunity to come and bring this bill for 4 sessions. And I just ask you to think as I do, as the salamander and the largemouth bass and whatever other animal or flower may be in the state book. It was all created by that God that Representative Shaw wrote from. Some people think it's wrong to put it in there with a fish or an animal. God created those things, and He created you and I, and He created government. He created civil government. I don't know how that we could separate who God is from who that we are and from everything that we do in life. From the hotel rooms that the Gideons put the Bibles in, to our homes that the Bible's in. And to tell me that it doesn't belong in our state is to tell me that we don't want God any longer in our country, which is what we're doing. We don't want God to rule us anymore. We'll leave our godly principles outside on the sidewalk, and we'll come in and we'll decide that we're better than God is, and we know more than what God does. I bring God with me. Even when I do wrong, even when I stand up and I'm doing wrong, I want God to be there to chastise me. And I stand before you today to say that if we take God out, as we have, as we did in our schools back in the 60s, and we took prayer out, that's the same thing that we're doing today.
I ask you in the balcony to calm down.
When we say that we don't want God anywhere about our government today. Thank you.
Representative Shaw.
Let's be clear. I didn't say we want to take the Bible out of the state. The Bible belongs in our homes, and when we read it, it belongs in our hearts, not in a state book. Let me be clear about something else. You didn't take prayer out of school. Prayer was never taken out of school. Prayer's in the heart. If your prayer's in the schoolhouse, you're not praying in the right place in the first place. Prayer is in the heart. And this book belongs in our heart and not on a desk or not in a blue book for us to brag that we are saying that we are state that the Bible is our book, because we know not everybody in the state of Tennessee would love for everybody to read it, would love for everybody to live by it, but they don't. But I'm not asking to take it out of the home and out of the state. I'm asking not to make it a state book, because you technically cannot make this a state book. You mean God wasn't thinking about nobody but Tennessee when he created this earth? He was thinking about not only this world, but the worlds to come. For God so loved the world, the ages, past, present, and future ages, that he gave his own son, that whosoever would believe in him should not perish, but have everlasting life. Not put it in a blue book. That's what God said. So I think you are insulting God to try to bring him down to a blue book. That's why I'm voting against your bill, because you're trying to bring God down to a level that he doesn't fit in. You and I are in this level, not God. So when we start here, we get the message right. And I just want to go on record. I love the Lord. I want this book to be in everybody's home. I want everybody to read it and to obey it. But I can't pass no law and make them do that. That's something that has to be done as a witness through Jesus Christ, our Lord and Savior, in Jerusalem, in Judea, and in all of the portions of the world. God bless you.
Representative Sexton.
Maybe Representative Shaw, you could go back into the 60s and find where the Supreme Court ruled that prayer was unconstitutional, and they took it out of schools. So not everyone has prayer in their heart. That's the reason that the Word of God has to be shared with people, because not everyone hears it. And you did mention about bringing God down, and I'm glad that I brought him down into my heart. As you mentioned, we bring God into our heart. So yes, I brought him down to where that I am. And I am not ashamed to put the Bible in the blue book as our state book. Not the Bible as a state book, but the Bible as the official state book of Tennessee. It's still the holy word of God. I'm not ashamed to do that. I know that others think it's wrong, and I appreciate your opinion. And I hope that you'll agree with me that it would be a good thing for our people to read it. Now, they said that they had to take the 10 Commandments down out of schools because they were afraid someone would read it. Are we afraid that someone will see the Bible in the blue book and maybe read it? And read John 3:16 or Romans, where it says, I'm not ashamed of the gospel, for it is the power of God unto salvation to every man that believes it. I'm not ashamed of that. I'm not ashamed of living in Tennessee. In the buckle of the Bible Belt, according to the Los Angeles Times, they said that Tennessee and Nashville was the buckle of the Bible Belt because we had more printing of the Word of God than anywhere in the world. Thank you.
Leader again.
Mr. Speaker, I move that we take up some collection plates. We got our ushers here, and we should be good to go. And we got Terry Lynn that might provide a song. So, but anyway, I do support the bill, and thank you for bringing it.
President Boyd.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move previous question.
Previous question's been called. Any objection? Seeing no objection. All those in favor of House Joint Resolution 752, vote aye when the bell rings. Those opposed, vote no. Has every member voted? Does any member wish to change their vote? Mr. Clerk, please take the vote.
Ayes 50.
Constitutional majority, I hereby declare adopted without objection. The motion reconsider is tabled. Call the next bill, Mr. Clerk.
House Bill 2575 by Chairman Doggett and others relative to reports of child abuse.
Chairman Doggett, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move passage of House Bill 2575 on third and final consideration.
Chairman Doggett moves passage, probably second. Mr. Clerk, any amendments been filed?
Mr. Speaker, no amendments filed.
Chairman Doggett, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I renew my motion.
Chairman Doggett renews his motion. Any discussion on the bill? Seeing none, any objection to the question? Seeing none, all those in favor of House Bill 2575 vote aye when the bell rings. Those opposed vote no. As every member voted, does any member wish to change their vote? Mr. Clerk, please take the vote.
Ayes 82, 4 nays.
House Bill 2575 having received a constitutional majority, I hereby declare passed without objection. Motion to reconsider is tabled. Next bill, Mr. Clerk.
House Bill 2033 by Representative Freeman, relative to the Commercial Property Assessed Clean Energy and Resilience Act. Mr. Speaker, the Senate bill is on the desk.
Representative Freeman, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move to substitute and conform to Senate Bill 1990.
Representative Freeman moves to substitute and conform Senate Bill 1990. Probably second without objection. So ordered. Representative Freeman.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move passage of Senate Bill 1990 on third and final consideration.
Representative Freeman moves passage of Senate Bill 1990 on third and final consideration. Probably second. Mr. Clerk, call First Amendment.
House Agricultural and Natural Resources Committee Amendment number 1. Mr. Speaker, it's the same as Senate Amendment number 1.
Chairman Halford, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Move to withdraw.
Without objection, amendment number 1 withdrawn. Next amendment, Mr. Clerk.
Mr. Speaker, no further amendments.
Representative Freeman, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. So last year we passed the CPAY, and as municipalities were trying to put it into use, we realized there was some oversight in the language that contradicted each other. It's largely a cleanup bill. The clarification of the definition is in what a commercial property is. The bill states that a property owned by a state or local government but leased to a private entity, such as a housing authority, industrial development authority, could constitute as a commercial property under CPACE. We also clarified that the fees in which local governments could charge for being a program were covered by the outside entity. And with that, I renew my motion.
Representative Freeman renews his motion. Any discussion on the bill? Seeing none, any objection to the question? Seeing none. All those in favor of Senate Bill 1990 vote aye when the bell rings. Those opposed vote no. As every member voted, does any member wish to change their vote? Mr. Clerk, please take the vote.
Ayes 88.
1990, I received a constitutional majority. I hereby declare passed without objection. Motion to reconsider is tabled. Next bill, Mr. Clerk.
House Bill 2114 by Representative Eldridge and others, relative to warranties.
Representative Eldridge, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move passage of House Bill 2114 on third and final consideration.
Representative Eldridge moves passage. Probably second. Mr. Clerk, call First Amendment.
House Commerce Committee Amendment number 1.
Vice Chairman Bricken, you are recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Commerce Committee Amendment number 1 rewrites the bill. I move to adopt Committee Amendment number 1 and refer to the sponsor for an explanation.
Vice Chairman Bricken moves adoption amendment number 1. Probably seconded. Any discussion on amendment? Seeing none. All those in favor of amendment number 1 say aye. Aye. All those opposed say no. The ayes have it. You adopted. Next amendment, Mr. Clerk.
Mr. Speaker, no further amendments.
Representative Eldridge, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. This bill adds to unfair and deceptive practices to advertising and delivery of a home warranty to consumers in this state without explicitly stating in written detail what items will be covered and fully paid for by the warranty. And with that, Mr. Speaker, I renew my motion.
Representative Eldridge renews his motion. Any discussion on the bill? Seeing none. Any objection to the question? Seeing none. All those in favor of House Bill 2114 as amended vote aye when the bell rings. Those opposed vote no. As every member voted, does any member wish to change their vote? Mr. Clerk, please take the vote.
Ayes 87, no nays, 1 present, not voted.
House Bill 2114, I received a constitutional majority. Everybody declare passed without objection. Motion to reconsider is tabled. Next bill, Mr. Clerk.
House Bill 1916 by Representative Eldridge and others, relative to state employment.
Representative Eldridge, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move passage of House Bill 1916 on third and final consideration.
Representative Eldridge moves passage. Probably second. Mr. Clerk, call it First Amendment.
House State Government Committee Amendment number 1.
Chairman Kiesling, you are recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. This amendment does rewrite the bill. We're going to defer to Chairman Eldridge for further explanation. We move to adopt.
Chairman Keesley moves adoption of amendment number 1, probably second. Any discussion on the amendment? Seeing none, all those in favor of amendment number 1 say aye. Aye. All those opposed say no. The ayes have it. You adopted. Next amendment, Mr. Clerk.
Mr. Speaker, no further amendments.
Representative Elders, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. This bill would open up certain state jobs to applicants that do not have a four-year degree or maybe even working on a four-year degree. The department commissioners would determine which jobs that this would fall into. They would have the final say. And with that, Mr. Speaker, I renew my motion.
Representative Elders renews his motion. Any discussion on the bill? Representative Clemens.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. To what type of jobs would this apply?
Representative Elders.
This would be determined by the departments. There are certain jobs we know and understand that has to have a four-year degree. I know attorneys, that type of thing. But it would be determined by the commission, different department heads.
Representative Clemens.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you. Any further discussion? Seeing none, any objection to the question? Seeing none. All those in favor of House Bill 1916 as amended, vote aye when the bell rings. Those opposed, vote no. As every member voted, does any member wish to change their vote? Mr. Clerk, please take the vote.
Ayes 81, non-nays, 1 present, not voting.
House Bill 1916 and received a constitutional majority. Everybody declare passed without objection. The motion reconsiders table. Call up next bill, Mr. Clerk.
House Bill 2113 by Representative Elders and others relative to human trafficking.
Representative Elders, you are recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move passage of House Bill 2113 on third and final consideration.
Representative Elders moves passage. Bob second. Mr. Clerk, call up first amendment.
House State Government Committee Amendment number 1.
Chairman Keesling, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. This amendment again rewrites the bill. We'll defer to Chairman Eldridge for further explanation. We move to adopt.
Chairman Keesling moves adoption amendment number 1, probably second. Any discussion on the amendment? Seeing none, all those in favor of amendment number 1 say aye. Aye. All those opposed say no. The ayes have it. You adopted. Next amendment, Mr. Clerk.
Mr. Speaker, no further amendments.
Representative Elders, you are recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. This bill requires that the Department of Mental Health and Substance Abuse, Department of Corrections, and Department of Human Services to work with a nonprofit organization that focus on human trafficking, advocacy, education, and adds to the mandatory annual training of each of department personnel. This would also be training in identification, intervention, prevention, and treatment of human trafficking victims. And this program would have to be submitted for approval to TBI's Human Trafficking Advisory Council. And with that, Mr. Speaker, I renew my motion.
Representative Eldridge renews his motion. Any discussion on the bill? Seeing none. Any objection to the question? Seeing none. All those in favor of House Bill 2113 as amended, vote aye when the bell rings. Those opposed, vote no. As every member voted, does any member wish to change their vote? Mr. Clerk, please take the vote.
Ayes 88, no nays.
House Bill 2113 and received a constitutional majority. Everybody declare passed without objection. Motion reconsiders table. Call next bill, Mr. Clerk.
House Bill 2078 by Representative Bricken and others relative to wages. Mr. Speaker, the Senate bill is on the desk.
Representative Bricken, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move to substitute and conform the Senate Bill 2042.
Representative Bricken moves to substitute and form Senate Bill 2042, probably second without objection. So ordered. Representative Bricken.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move for passage of Senate Bill 20 on third and final consideration.
Representative Bricken moves to substitute 2042 on third and final consideration. Probably second. Mr. Clerk, call it first amendment.
House Commerce Committee Amendment number 1. Mr. Speaker, it's the same as Senate Amendment number 1.
Chairman Boyd, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. House Commerce Committee Amendment number 1 is the same as the Senate amendment. I move to withdraw House Commerce Committee Amendment number 1 and defer to the sponsor for explanation.
Without objection, amendment number 1 withdrawn. Next amendment, Mr. Clerk.
Mr. Speaker, no further amendments.
Representative Bricken, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. This bill will eliminate a Tennessee employer from applying for a federal certification to pay sub-minimum wages to our Tennessee disabled citizens. With that, Mr. Speaker, I renew my motion.
Representative Bricken renews his motion. Any discussion on the bill? Representative Jernigan.
Thank you. Chairman, I had this bill 4 years ago, and I just want to say thank you so much for bringing it. It's much needed. And it brings it to equal footing, and I'm just so proud that it's made it to the floor, and it's going to be one vote that I look forward to casting. So thank you so much.
Thank you. Any discussion? Seeing none. Any objection to the question? Seeing none. All those in favor of Senate Bill 2042 vote aye when the bell rings. Those opposed vote no. As every member voted, does any member wish to change their vote? Mr. Clerk, please take vote.
Ayes 89, no nays. 1979 by Representative Bricken and others relative to certain fees collected by the Secretary of State. Mr. Speaker, Senate bills on the desk.
Representative Bricken, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move to substitute 1983.
Representative Bricken moves to substitute 1983 without objection. So ordered. Representative Bricken.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move for passage of Senate Bill 1983 on third and final consideration.
Representative Bricken moves passage of Senate Bill 1983 on third and final consideration. By second, Mr. Clerk, call it First Amendment.
Mr. Speaker, no amendments filed.
Representative Bricken, you are recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. This bill is from our Secretary of State, and it extends for 1 year the reduced charitable licensing fee to $10 for all our Tennessee charities in the state. With that, I'll renew my motion.
Representative Bricken renews his motion. Any discussion on the bill? Seeing none. Any objection to the question? Seeing none. All those in favor of Senate Bill 1983 vote aye when the bell rings. Those opposed vote no. As every member casts their vote. Does any member wish to change their vote? Mr. Clerk, please take the vote.
Ayes 85, no nays, 5 present, not voting.
Senate Bill 1983, having received the Constitution majority, I declare passed without objection. Motion to reconsider is tabled. Call the next bill, Mr. Clerk.
House Bill 1664 by Representative Byrd and others relative to posting reviews on the internet.
Representative Byrd, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move passage of House Bill 1664 on third and final consideration.
Representative Byrd moves passage. Bobby second. Mr. Clerk, call the First Amendment.
House Commerce Committee Amendment number 1.
Vice Chairman Bricken, you are recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Commerce Committee Amendment number 1 rewrites the bill. I move to adopt Committee Amendment number 1 and refer to the sponsor for an explanation.
Vice Chairman Bricken moves adoption of amendment number 1, probably seconded. Any discussion on the amendment? Seeing none. All those in favor of amendment number 1 say aye, aye. All those opposed say no. The ayes have it. You adopt it. Next amendment, Mr. Clerk.
Mr. Speaker, no further amendments.
Representative Byrd, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I renew my motion.
Representative Byrd renews his motion. Any discussion on the bill? Seeing none. Any objection to the question? Seeing none. All those in favor of House Bill 1664 as amended, vote aye. When the bell rings, those opposed vote no. As every member voted, does any member wish to change their vote? Representative Sexton from Granger, what would you like to say, please?
Thank you, Speaker Sexton from Cumberland.
Mr. Clerk, please take the vote while you go.
Representative Byrd, is this your last bill?
Hopefully not.
Representative Sexton.
So you got some more bills coming to committee?
Finance behind the budget right now.
It could be his last. Yes, it could be. Mr. Clerk, can you take the vote real quick?
Ayes 86, 1 nay.
House Bill 1664, having received a constitutional majority, everybody declare passed by objection. Motion to reconsider is tabled. Representative Sexton.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Representative Byrd, I just want you to know that you and I came in together. We've had a lot of good times, and God's blessed lives, and you've been through a tough time. But these people in this house here and their families and their churches has been praying for you. And we want to thank God that you're standing back in that well. And if this is your last bill, we just want to say to you, you've been a blessing to know and a joy to serve with. And you're one of the hardest working representatives for your people that I know of. And we love you, brother. God bless you.
Call up next bill, Mr. Clerk.
House Bill 2288 by Chairman Boyd, relative to timeshares.
Chairman Boyd, you're recognized.
Speaker, I move passage of House Bill 2288 on third and final consideration.
Chairman Boyd moves passage, Bobby second. Mr. Clerk, call up First Amendment.
House Commerce Committee Amendment Number 1.
Vice Chairman Bricken, you are recognized.
Mr. Speaker, Commerce Committee Amendment Number 1 rewrites the bill. I move to adopt Committee Amendment Number 1 and refer to the sponsor for an explanation.
Vice Chairman Bricken moves adoption amendment number 1, Bobby second. Any discussion on the amendment? Seeing none, say aye. Aye. All those opposed say no. The ayes have it. You adopt. Next amendment, Mr. Clerk.
Mr. Speaker, no further amendments.
Chairman Boyd, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. House Bill 2288 changes statute with regard to timeshares. Under current law, if a person buys a timeshare and has buyer's remorse, they have up to 10 days to either hand deliver or mail a notice that they want to cancel or terminate the purchase. This simply adds a third option, which is that you can send an email, which would ultimately put a timestamp on it. Mr. Speaker, I renew my motion.
Chairman Boyd renews his motion. Any discussion on the bill? Seeing none. Any objection to the question? Seeing none. All those in favor of House Bill 2288 is amended, vote aye when the bell rings. Those opposed, vote no. Has every member voted? Does any member wish to change their vote? Mr. Clerk, please take the vote.
Ayes 90 nays.
House Bill 2288 having received constitutional majority, hereby declare passed without objection. The motion reconsider is tabled. Call up next bill, Mr. Clerk.
House Bill 2743 by Chairman Hicks, relative to investments.
Chairman Hicks, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move passage of House Bill 2743 on third and final consideration.
Chairman Hicks moves passage, properly seconded. Mr. Clerk, call it First Amendment.
House State Government Committee Amendment Number 1.
Chairman Kiesling, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. This amendment does rewrite the bill. We defer to Chairman Hicks for further explanation. We move to adopt.
Chairman Kiesling moves adoption amendment number 1, properly seconded. Any discussion on the amendment? Seeing none. All those in favor of amendment number 1 say aye. Aye. All those opposed say no. The ayes have it. You adopt. Next amendment, Mr. Clerk.
Mr. Speaker, no further amendments.
Chairman Hicks, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Members, House Bill 2743 as amended allows the Investment Committee for the TCRS Board of Trustees to divest from any investment it has with an entity found to be doing business with or supporting a country sanctioned by the U.S. Department of Treasury. Mr. Speaker, I renew my motion.
Chairman Hicks renews his motion. Any discussion on the bill? Seeing none. Any objection to the question? Seeing none. All those in favor of House Bill 2743 as amended, vote aye when the bell rings. Those opposed, vote no. Has every member voted? Does any member wish to change their vote? Heard aye. Mr. Clerk, please take the vote.
Ayes 89, no nays.
House Bill 2743, having received the constitutional majority, hereby declare passed without objection. The motion reconsider is tabled. Next bill, Mr. Clerk.
House Bill 2645 by Representative Powell.
Representative Powell, at your desk.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. If I could request to roll that 1 week to next Monday's regular calendar. Thank you.
Without objection, rolled 1 week. Next bill, Mr. Clerk.
House Bill 2056 by Representative Hurt, relative to solar energy. Mr. Speaker, the Senate bill is on the desk.
Representative Hurt, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move to substitute and conform to Senate Bill 1925.
Representative Hurt moves substitute and conform Senate Bill 1925, probably second without objection. So ordered. Representative Hurt.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move passage of Senate Bill 1925 on third and final consideration.
Representative Hurt moves passage of Senate Bill 1925 on third and final consideration, probably second. Mr. Clerk, call the First Amendment.
House Agricultural and Natural Resources Committee Amendment Number 1. Mr. Speaker, it's the same as Senate Amendment Number 1.
Chairman Halford, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Move to withdraw.
Without objection, amendment number 1 withdrawn. Next amendment.
Speaker, no further amendments.
Representative Hurt, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Members, this legislation as amended is straightforward. As we have seen rapid growth in the solar industry in recent years, and this legislation comes from concerns expressed by landowners. Put simply, the bill requires each large lease for the installation of solar equipment to include a decommissioning plan with financial assurances. The bill reflects a compromise between the Farm Bureau and the Solar Energy Association. And with that, Mr. Speaker, I renew my motion.
Representative Hurt renews his motion. Any discussion on the bill? Seeing none, any objection to the question? Seeing none. All those in favor of Senate Bill 1925 vote aye. Those opposed vote no. Has every member voted? Does any member wish to change their vote? Mr. Clerk, please take the vote.
Ayes 91, no nays.
Senate Bill 1925 having received the Constitutional majority, I hereby declare passed without objection. Motion for reconsider is tabled. Call up next bill, Mr. Clerk.
House Bill 2553 by Representative Hurt and others relative to adult education.
Representative, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move passage of House Bill 2553 on third and final consideration.
Representative Hurt moves passage, properly seconded. Mr. Clerk, call up first amendment.
House Education and Instruction Committee Amendment number 1.
Chair Lady Moody, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move to adopt and defer to the sponsor for explanation.
Chair Lady Moody moves adoption of amendment number 1, probably seconded. Any discussion on the amendment? Seeing none. All those in favor of amendment number 1 say aye. Aye. All those opposed say no. The ayes have it. You adopt it. Next amendment, Mr. Clerk.
Mr. Speaker, no further amendments.
Representative Hurt, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. House Bill 2553 just allows adult high schools to provide a virtual option. And with that, Mr. Speaker, I renew my motion.
Representative Hurt renews his motion. Any discussion on the bill? Seeing none. Any objection to the question? Seeing none. All those in favor of House Bill 2553 as amended, vote aye when the bell rings. Those opposed, vote no. Has every member voted? Does any member wish to change their vote? Mr. Clerk, please take the vote.
Ayes 91, no nays.
House Bill 2553, having received a constitutional objection, the motion for reconsider is tabled. Call up next bill, Mr. Clerk.
House Bill 1850 by Representative Hurt and others relative to Course Access Program Act.
Representative Hurt, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move passage of House Bill 1850 on third and final consideration.
Representative Hurt moves passage.
Instruction Committee Amendment number 1.
Chair Lady Moody.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move to adopt and defer to the sponsor for explanation.
Chair Lady Moody moves adoption of amendment number 1, probably second. Any discussion on the amendment? Seeing none. All those in favor of amendment number 1 say aye. Aye. All those opposed say no. The ayes have it. You adopt the next amendment, Mr. Clerk.
Mr. Speaker, no further amendments.
Representative Hurt, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. This bill, as amended, expands the course access program that already exists in the code to provide new opportunities for learning experiences and educational opportunities for students outside of the classroom. And with that, Mr. Speaker, I renew my motion.
Representative Hurt renews his motion. Any discussion on the bill? Seeing none. Any objection to the question? Seeing none. All those in favor of House Bill 1850 as amended, vote aye when the bell rings. Those opposed, vote no. Has every member voted? Does any member wish to change their vote? Mr. Clerk, please take the vote. Bill 1850, having received a constitutional majority, I hereby declare passed without objection. Motion for reconsider is tabled. Call up next bill, Mr. Clerk.
House Bill 2472 by Chairman Powers relative to charitable gaming. Mr. Speaker, the Senate bill's on the desk.
Chairman Powers, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move to substitute and conform to Senate Bill 2454.
Chairman Powers moves substitute and form Senate Bill 2454 without objection. So ordered. Chairman Powers.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move passage of Senate Bill 2454 for consideration.
Chairman Powers moves adoption of Senate Bill 2454 on third and final consideration. Probably second. Mr. Clerk, call up first amendment.
Mr. Speaker, no amendments filed.
Chairman Powers, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. House Bill Senate Bill 2454 will aid many organizations throughout our state that would like to raise money and support local charities. Right now, they are currently prevented from raising funds until 5 years after receiving their 501c3 or 501c19 designation. Senate Bill 2454 simply lowers that blackout period from 5 years to 3 years. And with that, I renew my motion.
Chairman Powers renews his motion. Any discussion on the bill? Seeing none. Any objection to the question? Seeing none. All those in favor of Senate Bill 2454 vote aye when the bell rings. Those opposed vote no. Has every member voted? Does any member wish to change their vote? Hardaway, aye. Mr. Clerk, please take the vote.
Ayes 87, no nays, one present, not voting.
House Bill. Everybody declare passed without objection. Motion for reconsider is tabled. Call up next bill, Mr.
But Chairman Powers relative to curriculum.
Chairman Powers, you're recognized.
Speaker, I move passage of House Bill 2742 on third and final consideration.
Chairman Powers moves passage, probably seconded. Mr. Clerk, any amendments been filed?
Mr. Speaker, no amendments filed.
Chairman Powers, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. House Bill 2742 requires that curriculums in grade 9 through 12 teach the virtues of capitalism and constitutional form of government in the U.S. as compared to other political and economic systems such as communism and socialism. Currently, history and economic, culture, and political government curriculums are comparing and contrasting
the theoretical principles of capitalism and socialism and communism as expressed through Adam Smith and Karl Marx. We know that the job of educators is to teach accurate, unbiased material to the students, and the objective of this bill is not to force a specific ideology on students, but to teach them our founding principles. And with that, Mr. Speaker, I renew my motion.
Chairman Powers renews his motion. Any discussion on the bill? Seeing none. Oh, Representative Johnson.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I think you said about no bias. The idea is we teach all of those systems in high school, every one of those systems. And we teach students how to think, not what to think. I've heard people in this body and committees talk about, oh, well, some survey said this many young people are okay. If you're thinking that that's because it's being taught in schools, it's absolutely not. We teach facts and we teach how to think. No one is teaching that one system is better than the other. This bill actually says for us to teach students what to think instead of how to think.
Was that a question or just a statement? It sounded like a statement.
It looks like he had a response, so I'm interested in what he thinks about that.
Chairman Powers.
Thank you. Yes, well, I'll be glad to answer that or respond to it. But yeah, we believe in our founding principles, and we believe what this country was founded on, that capitalism is better than socialism or communism. Right now, they're comparing the economic systems. We want to teach the virtues of it and teach that the republic form of government is the best type of government in the world.
Representative Johnson.
But again, you said in your statement, you said you wanted to teach it without bias, and that gives the bias. I don't think I ever had a student that, suggested one of those other forms was better. They all deduced that the form that we have, they liked. So what I'm telling you is I don't think that this bill is going to teach kids how to think. And I think that's a serious concern.
Chairman Powers.
We're actually trying to teach them the virtues of it. We have students that come out, and I've seen students in high school wearing a Che Guevara t-shirt, and he was a communist, a mass murderer who worked for Fidel Castro. So yes, they're learning something in school that we're not teaching them, but they're learning something somewhere. We want to teach them that capitalism is better than socialism and communism, and yes, it is. That's a fact. That's not an opinion.
Representative Clemens.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and thank you, sponsor. I appreciate it. I think everybody in this body would agree that capitalism is better than those other two forms, but I'm curious as if you could elaborate on what the virtues of capitalism are, just two or three for me.
Chairman Powers.
I think all we have to do is look at some other countries that have tried the others. If we look at Cuba, Venezuela, China, North Korea, other countries that have tried communism and socialism, that's all we have to do is look to them and compare our form of government and what our economic system is as compared to theirs. Those people are starving to death, and those people are dying in those countries. And we have the best form of government in the world, and that's what we're trying to teach.
Representative Clemens.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And I would just reiterate what my colleague from Knox County said, teaching students how to think rather than what to think is probably more important than pushing something on them. That way, if they do get so misguided and think that communism and socialism are good, they will know better because they will have studied it and be able to do a comparative analysis of those forms of government and economies. And also, I don't want it to be lost on anybody that we passed a bill tonight encouraging learning about civil rights, but we're going to mandate the learning and virtues of capitalism. I think our body should take note of that. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you, Chairman Powers. Anything? No. Representative Williams, you're next.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Move previous question.
Previous question has been called. Any objection? I see objection. We're on the board. All those in favor of previous question vote aye when the bell rings. Those opposed vote no. As every member voted, does any member wish to change their vote? Mr. Clerk, please take the vote.
Aye, 67, 23 nays.
Previous question prevails. We are voting. All those in favor of House Bill 2742 vote aye when the bell rings. Those opposed vote no. As every member voted, does any member wish to change their vote? Mr. Clerk, please take the vote.
Aye, 68, 21 nays.
House Bill 2742, having received the constitutional majority, everybody declare passed without objection. The motion to reconsider is tabled. Call up next bill, Mr. Clerk.
House Bill 2148 by Representative Helton and others relative to the Tennessee Center for Nursing Advancement. Mr. Speaker, the Senate bill is on the desk.
Chair Lady Helton, you are recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move to substitute and conform to Senate Bill 2401.
Chair Lady Helton moves to substitute and form Senate Bill 2401, probably second without objection. So ordered. Chair Lady Helton.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move passage of Senate Bill 2401 on final consideration.
Chair Lady Helton moves passage of Senate Bill 2401 on third and final consideration, probably second. Ms. Clerk, call the first amendment.
House Education Administration Committee Amendment number 1, Mr. Speaker, same as Senate Amendment number 1.
Chairman White, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Same as, so move to withdraw.
Without objection, amendment number 1 withdrawn. Next amendment, Mr. Clerk.
House Finance Ways 1, Mr. Speaker, is filed as House Amendment 2.
Chair Lady Hazelwood.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Move to withdraw.
Without objection, amendment number 2 withdrawn. Next amendment, Mr. Clerk.
House Amendment 3, Belito Lambert, Mr. Speaker, was timely filed. Mr. Speaker, it's the same as Senate Amendment number 3.
Leader Lambert, you're recognized. Add.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Hazelwood,
Move
yes.
to withdraw.
Without objection, amendment number 3 withdrawn. Next amendment, Mr. Clerk.
Mr. Speaker, no further
Chair
amendments.
Lady Helton, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. This bill creates the Tennessee Center for Nursing Advancement within East Tennessee State University to address issues of nursing workforce needs. And I renew my motion.
Chair Lady Helton renews the motion. Any discussion on the bill? Representative Shaw, for what purpose, please?
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I know that I am out of order, but I have a guest that have arrived in the chamber. A young lady who's here to shadow me today and tomorrow, Miss Bethany Miller. I'd like for you and the House to help make her welcome tonight. Miss Bethany Miller, who's here with us. Thank you.
We have a pause. Hang on one second. All right, we're back on the road again. Chair Lady Helton renews her motion. Any discussion on the bill? Seeing none. Seeing none. All those in favor of Senate Bill 2401 vote aye when the bell rings. Opposed vote no. As every member voted, does any member wish to change their vote? Calfee, aye. Hodges, aye. Leatherwood, aye. Hodges, aye. Rudd, aye. Mr. Clerk, please take the vote.
Ayes 89, no nays.
Senate Bill 2401, having received a constitutional majority, I hereby declare passed without objection. Motion to reconsider is tabled. Call up next bill, Mr. Clerk.
That completes the regular calendar, Mr. Speaker.
Call up next calendar, Mr. Clerk.
Mr. Speaker, the House has a message calendar.
Call up next message, Mr. Clerk.
Senate Bill 2616 by Representative Wright relative to political parties. Mr. Speaker, March 21st, 2022, the Senate non-concurrent and House Amendment number 1.
Representative Wright, you are recognized.
Forward in that there should be a Tennessee state requirement of 3 years to be on the ballot for election to the U.S. House of Representatives or the U.S. Senate from the state of Tennessee. Mr. Speaker, I move to lift from the table the motion to reconsider action in passing Senate Bill SB 2616.
Without objection, so ordered. Representative Wright.
I move to reconsider our action on Senate Bill SB 2616.
Without objection, so ordered. Representative Wright.
I've moved passage of Senate Bill SB 2616 on third and final consideration.
Representative Wright moves passage of Senate Bill 2616, properly seconded. Chairman Crawford, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move to reconsider our action on amendment number 1.
Without objection, so ordered. Chairman Crawford.
I move to withdraw 1.
Without objection, so ordered. Representative Wright, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move passage of Senate Bill SB 2616 on third and final consideration.
Any discussion on the bill? Representative Weaver.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Could you, Mr. Sponsor, would you explain what this bill does from the Senate side?
Representative Wright.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. From the Senate bill, I read that we would require 3-year residency in the state of Tennessee to be on the ballot for the U.S. House of Representatives or the U.S. Senate.
Representative Weaver.
Is that effective immediately?
Representative Wright.
Yes, upon
Representative Weaver.
signing.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Leader Camper. Pass. Representative Williams.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move previous question.
Previous question's been called. Any objection? Without objection, we're on previous question. Senate. All right, we're voting on Senate Bill 2616. All those in favor vote aye when the bell rings. Those opposed vote no. As every member voted, does any member wish to change their vote? Mr. Clerk, please take the vote.
Ayes 7018, nay, 1 present, not voting.
Senate Bill 2616, I received a constitutional majority. I hereby declare passed without objection. The motion to reconsider is tabled. Next message, Mr. Clerk.
House Bill 2670 by Leader Gant and others relative to education, higher education. Mr. Speaker, on March 21st, 2022, the Senate substituted House Bill 2670 for Senate Bill 2290, adopted Amendment 2 and passed House Bill 2670 as amended.
Let Journal Faison and Farmer are excused. Leader Gant, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. What this adds back into the legislation, it adds the surveys will be reported to the House Finance in addition to House Education.
Leader Gant.
Move to concur in the Senate Amendment number 2.
Leader Gant moves to concur in Senate Amendment number 2, probably seconded. Any discussion on the amendment? Seeing none, any objection to the question? Amendment number 2, vote aye. When the bell rings, those opposed vote no. Does any member wish to change their vote? Gant, aye. Leatherwood, aye. Mr. Clerk, please take the vote.
18 nays.
Senate Amendment number 2, having received the constitutional majority, I hereby declare concurred in without objection. The motion to reconsider is tabled. Call the next message, Mr. Clerk.
Mr. Speaker, that completes the message calendar.
Next order, Mr. Clerk.
Unfinished business.
Unfinished business. Representative Wright, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. After consultation with both leaders, I move that the rules be suspended for immediate consideration of Senate Joint Resolution number 1430.
Mr. Clerk, please read the caption.
Senate Joint Resolution 1430 by Representative Wright, a resolution honoring and commending the members and coaches of Bearden High School girls basketball team upon winning the TSSAA Division I Class 4A state championship.
You've heard the caption. Any objections? Without objections, the rules are suspended. Representative Wright.
I move to concur in the Senate Joint Resolution number 1430 and that all members of the Knox County delegation be listed as co-prime sponsors.
Representative Wright moves to concur in Senate Joint Resolution 1430. Probably second. Exclusions duly noted. Without objection. Any objection to the question? Seeing none. All those in favor say aye. Aye. All those opposed say no. The ayes have it. I declare objection. The motion to reconsider is tabled. Representative Wright.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. After consultation with both leaders, I move that the rules be suspended for immediate consideration of SJR number 1450.
Mr. Clerk, please read the caption.
Senate Joint Resolution 1450 by Representative Wright, a resolution to recognize and honor legendary softball coach Ralph Weekly.
You heard the caption. Any objections? Without objection, the rules are suspended. Representative Wright.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move to concur in Senate Joint Resolution number 1450 and that all members of the Knox County delegation be listed as co-prime sponsors.
Representative Wright moves to concur in Senate Joint Resolution 1450, probably seconded. All those in favor, exclusions duly noted. Any objection to the question? Seeing none. All those in favor say aye. Aye. All those opposed say no. The ayes have it. I declare concurred in without objection. The motion to reconsider is tabled. Representative Hardaway, you're recognized.
Thank you, Speaker. I move that the rules be suspended for the immediate introduction and consideration of H.R. 1036.
Mr. Clerk, please read the caption.
House Joint Resolution 1036 by Representative Hardaway, resolution on the memory of Marvis Laverne Nealon Jones of Memphis.
You've heard the caption. The rules are suspended. Representative Hardaway.
Thank you, Speaker. I move adoption of H.J.R. number 1036 and in consultation with both leaders, ask that all those voting in the affirmative be listed as co-prime sponsors with the Shelby County delegation listed first.
Representative Hardaway moves adoption of House Joint Resolution 1036, probably second. Exclusions duly noted. Any objection to the question? Seeing none. All those in favor of House Resolution 1036 say aye. Aye. All those opposed say no. I declare it adopted. Without objection, motion to reconsider is tabled. Leader Lamberth.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move that House Bill 1683 be heard in the Education and Instruction Committee this week.
You've heard the motion. Any objections? Without objections, so ordered. Leader Lamberth.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move to withdraw HJR 848, 849, and 850. They've been handled in other pieces of legislation.
You've heard the motion. Any objections? Without objections, so ordered. Pursuant to Rule 52, I name Leader Camper as the first prime sponsor of House Bill 340. I name Chair Lady Hazelwood as the first prime sponsor of House Bill 1665. Mr. Clerk.
Mr. Speaker, we have some messages from the Senate. Mr. Speaker, I'm directed to return to the House Bill 1677, substituted for the Senate bill on the same subject, amended and passed by the Senate.
Thursday's message calendar. Mr. Clerk.
Mr. Speaker, message from the Senate. I'm directed to transmit to the House Senate Bill 1782. The Senate refused to receive from its action and non-concurring in House Amendments 1. The Speaker appointed a conference committee composed of Senators Bell, Lundberg, and Ackberry.
Thursday's message calendar. Next order, Mr. Clerk.
Announcements.
Announcements. Representative Campbell, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Colleagues, you know, it's very rare that I pick up the microphone. I'm requesting a thunderous applause. He's at that point in life where he may be becoming a little bit hard of hearing. Happy birthday to my seatmate, Representative Paul Sherrill. Thank you.
Representative Rudd.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Read today in the Tennessean, something I predicted a few weeks ago was coming. The Tennessean has reported that our Governor Lee wants to increase our debt to $500 million to help fund a new $1 billion Titans Dome stadium. I, for one, am not for that. They can fund their own stadium. My district needs things, not a Titan stadium. As you recall, in the national draft a couple of years ago, the Titans attacked this assembly for its values and attacked us on national TV, and now they want money. I asked you when that comes before us not to grant that because our districts need that money more. Thank you.
Representative Haston.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. K-12 Education Subcommittee will meet tomorrow at 3 p.m. in House Hearing Room 2.
Representative Parkinson.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I assume that was the first shot fired across the bow for the budget? Yes? Okay, thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Representative Beck.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And I would like to correct us about my district, that apparently this is $500 million in general obligation bonds that will have to be paid back. So it's not a gift. Thank you very much.
Any further announcements? Representative Clemens.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. It's more of a question. You had referenced us starting session on Wednesday mornings. Do we know when that is going to begin yet?
We're monitoring how many bills are in calendar and rules. This last week, I think there was only 50 plus bills in calendar and rules, which means we only need to come for 2 days. When that bill hits, so once we get to about 80 in calendar rules, then we'll add the Wednesday. So if you're watching, then just watch calendar and rules. Any further announcements? Seeing none. Next order, Mr. Clerk.
Roll call.
Roll call. Mr. Clerk, please take the roll.
Mr. Speaker, 87 members present.
Next order, Mr. Clerk.
That completes the regular order, Mr. Speaker.
Leader Gant, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move that the House stand in recess until 9 a.m. on Thursday, 2022.
Without objection, the House stands in recess till 9 a.m. on Thursday, 1st, 2022.